let's see. I never understood the idea of like. I guess I understand like the Trinity, right? Like obviously three persons, one God, right? But like, what I don't know how to explain to a Muslim how God could be three persons but one God. I'm confused about
Yeah,
that. I guess the metaphysical part.
It depends on their objection specifically. Are they saying it's tritheism explicitly, or are they just saying it doesn't make sense?
I would
I
say,
guess usually that doesn't make sense.
yeah. I would say the same. It doesn't make sense. You cannot have mentally be one being. I mean, unless you want to say that the word God for you is the name you want to give to the group of three divine beings. Okay, but that's silly. Then, if that's the case, the four of us are a fortune, right? But I don't see the unifying thing. You're saying that a conscious being is somehow three persons, the conscious being, but also at the same time one. But that seems really absurd to me. Like, it's not possible. It just, I mean, how could it be possible? It's just too weird, right?
So when it comes to the Muslim thing, I guess you could say that like with a lot of them, they'll say things like, so do you know, like, do you have a knowledge on Tawheed and like how they account for the attributes?
Yeah, yeah. Where it's how like Allah
Yeah,
has
so
like
with some of
two
them,
hands and
especially
all
like
that.
the Salafis, they'll say stuff like, Allah has the attribute of a hand, but we just don't know how that works, right? Or they'll say, Allah has a hand and this is a literal hand, but we just don't know how.
You're muted.
All
I'm still
good.
here.
It's
Yeah,
all
it looks
good.
like Roy kind of cut out. Rip.
No, so it's the fact that God is so we just go to the idea that God is like cannot be comprehended, right? I usually go to that too, but I don't know. I guess it just doesn't feel suffice like sometimes.
Yeah, of course.
So that's
Yeah, I would say
the thing.
yeah. Like at least for me, like what I like to do is just go to the because a lot of the times besides the coherence objection, the other objection they'd bring up is like the deity of Christ is not exactly explicit in the biblical
All right.
text. And then like
I love
Bust down.
yeah, I like to
Hey, how we doing?
Hey, what's up, bust down. And I like to appeal to the idea that Christ seems to make very explicit entailments that would entail like his divinity, whether they be explicit or not.
Is my mic working now?
Yeah, your mic's working now.
Okay. So, anyways, what I'm saying is that they have this idea that at least some of them, that there's a certain mystery to Allah's attributes, and if they draw a real distinction between the attributes and the essence, then they've introduced a multiplicity of attributes. So even they have to accept a multiplicity in some sense. We're just saying it's in fact, they're in a worse place than us because this is an absolute multiplicity, whereas we only introduce a relative one.
Yeah, good point.
Now
there.
I guess you could say, well, what happened after like my thing cut out? Because I don't know the context anymore.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Okay. So like wait, modern atheism, can you restate the objection? Because honestly, I forgot what you said because I was trying to answer Jay's thing.
What I want again?
I think modern atheism was saying like in what, correct me if I'm wrong, modern atheism, but it seems like your objection is like saying if we can say that one name applies to the three persons, what prevents us from saying we're united in this like esoteric sense?
Yeah.
Like,
what I say, like, what do you mean one person, three persons, one God? I mean, are you saying that unless you say that God is the name you give to the group of three persons, but that's trivial, okay? Like, what is a God? What is a person? You have to define this very exactly. And I think if you define this very exactly, you will reach at some point some problem.
That's it.
yeah, I think.
Oh, we would just say that when we say that each of the persons are God, we're just identifying them with the divine essence because we believe in divine simplicity. So when we say like when we say God, we're referring to the divine essence, which each of the three persons are identical to.
By the way, I think this violates that means they're not that identical to each other. This violates the transitivity of identity. You know?
Yeah, so we would just deny the transitivity of identity in this context because we draw a virtual distinction between the person and the essence. And then we say that because these three things are relative entities which are opposed from each other, that therefore they are necessarily distinct. Whereas transitivity doesn't necessarily hold when you have what's it called, the relative entities being identified with an absolute entity. So like for example, Aristotle gives an example of this with how if you have like a road between two cities, there's two relative entities identified with the road, but they're distinct from each other.
Yeah, I know. I saw that. Did you saw the debate in Capturing Christianity with that philosopher and
Yes.
Janitor? Yeah, I saw that too. I actually am planning to make a stream with maybe I'm trying to get Metaphysics Mind into my channel to make a big stream on the Trinity. I think my opinion is that this identity paradoxes and relative issues of identity. They feel more like word games rather than logical issues. Because, for example, it's like the road from Athens to Thebes. You see, it's not identical to the road between Thebes and Athens, but in a way, yeah, it's obviously like the same road. But I think this is just
It
for me.
has,
Yeah.
yeah, it has to do with the idea of subsistent relations because we say that the road from Thebes to Athens is identified with the road between, and then the road from Athens to Thebes is also identified with the road between. But because they're two relative entities, right? Because they oppose each other, as one is downhill and the other is uphill, so they would be opposed in that sense. Considered as relation, they would be distinct, but considered as absolute being, they would be identified. And I can what's his name? I'm trying to remember the guy who talks about this in his paper.
Yeah.
There's this
Bellow?
good paper. Oh yeah, it's Mark Spencer's paper, the on the Trinity and Divine Simplicity, that talks about this, and he gives this analogy.
Yeah, I think this is like a bit like word games that exploit the vagueness of language to make a point, but they don't really, like, for example, there is this paradox: when does a pile become a pile? If I start taking grains out from it, like, I'm not really sure it's a logical issue, because I think if there is that's an issue of language. If we change the word trajectory instead of road, then suddenly the paradox disappears if we are specific enough. So it's not really a logical issue in the end, it's just like a language issue. I don't think there's a big problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think the paradox disappears because if you just change the word road, the trajectory from the two cities would be identified with the
No,
trajectory
no, it
between
will be different. The
two.
trajectory from Athens to Thebes is different because in the trajectory is defined by a starting point and an end point. That's the definition of trajectory. You can't define it this way, so it will be different. It will stop being identical. The
Yeah,
road is a
they
physical
would say
thing.
that they're identified insofar as they're identified with the absolute being, though, even in that sense. I don't see how this can be caused by a confusion in terms, because I think, like, Thomas specifically and what's it called? Aristotle as well would define their terms pretty well. They give very, like, specific definitions. Like, if you look at, like, we have entire, like, just books dedicated to, like, giving specific philosophical definitions. Like, there's Thomistic philosophy in 4 volume. There's the Sacra Theologiae Summa, which goes all into this.
Yeah,
I mean, even if you like, even if we don't want to use the relative versus absolute distinction, there's still examples in which transitivity is violated. So I don't think Tomaszewski brought this up, but there's identity over time where I think transitivity doesn't hold, and then there's Chris Tweed's example of opaque contexts in which it's denied as well. So I think those three would be very interesting examples to talk about if you want to go there.
yeah. I think again, identity over time. It is ultimately a language issue. It's like am I identical to me 1 year ago? Obviously not. Something could have changed. I have different properties, but I am me. Like, am I Juan? Yeah, because Juan is like the name you give to that. But I would say this is a language game issue. Even though the guys disagree,
Well,
I think it's
it
ultimately a
is
language.
it is both about semantics and logic, but those two aren't unrelated. So in this case, yeah, there's a semantic issue. I can affirm that, but at the end of the day, it's still a logical issue because let's say you want to index it at the time. So like Juan at T1, let's just say Juan at T1 is 5 years old, but then Juan at T2 is 10 years old, right? You would have to say that those two are the same person, but they're still not the same age. And there doesn't
Yeah.
seem to be a transitivity there with the age.
It is if you just define one exactly enough, then it is. As for example, the guy who has my DNA, then okay, only looking at that the way, we ignoring the fact that my hair can have my DNA or stuff like that. I mean, just hypothetically, if you define then Juan as the guy who has my DNA, now you can say Juan at this T has an age, Juan has this other age. You mean this is not what I mean? Like, I think it's more a language. I don't really see it's a logical issue there. I disagree.
I still
It's a
think that the
logical issue.
logical issue remains though, because if you have if you just define Juan as the thing with your DNA, there's still a thing with your DNA at multiple locations in time, and we would say that's identified with you, and yet that still has different properties over time, meaning that there's no transitivity of identity there. Because if like Juan at T1 is 5 and Juan at T2 is identical to Juan at T1, then if transitivity works, then you would say Juan at T2 is 5. So, and this works even if you're defining Juan as someone with your specific DNA code, because
Right.
both of them would have your DNA.
Yeah, but what I would say is the me at 5 years ago, it has one of his properties is to be Juan, but it's not like yeah. I mean, that's I know I know what you're getting at. It's not like fully specify all of his properties. I don't know. I know.
Yeah, I can agree that one of his properties is having your DNA and thus being you. It's just that he's also identified with you. So in terms of identity, we could say Juan at T1 equals Juan at T2. And I don't think there's a very good account of theories of time that does not entail that, because I think all of them, they would basically fail any intuitive test that we could give them. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Because the the Thomist account is that identity of time is basic. So that's how we would account for it. We wouldn't really say there's some special mechanism. We would just bite the bullet and say that, yeah, Juan at T1 is equal to Juan at T2, and they differ in properties. It's just not a contradiction or an issue because they are at different times. Or you could say it's because they're virtually distinct, which I'm not sure. Busdown, what are your thoughts on that solution?
What's the particular solution?
Suppose you want to say that a person at, so let's say you have Juan, and then this person exists at 2 temporal locations. So you can say Juan at T1 and Juan at T2. Would you say that those two are virtually distinct from each other, or is it only a nominal distinction?
I think you could say that they're possibly virtually distinct.
Okay. Yeah. So then, yeah, that would just be another example of virtual distinction, I guess.
Yeah. Sure. But okay, I think the problem will remain because for the Trinity, we can still ask the question, like at any given time, like without looking at the future or the past, at any given time, are the beings of the Trinity identical with each other, right? And you still have the issue, right? I mean, I guess your example would show that in a general sense, identity has like some flexibility to it, right? Like some issues that where it cannot be, it doesn't have to be exactly like transitivity, you know? I mean.
Yeah, the point of that example was just to show a case where transitivity is violated in the created order, and we're allowed to make this violation like epistemically because it's justified by our intuitions. Now, in the case of the Trinity, I don't think our intuitions would lead us to the conclusion that transitivity applies. I think they would lead us against it. And you can look at how, for example, people approach Mysterianism and God, and how the Mysterian idea of, oh, we just don't know, but because God transcends the created order, it works. That seems to be the very intuitive solution amongst, I'd say at least most Christians, but even like a lot of atheists I've talked to have like said, yeah, that seems to be intuitive enough.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Yeah, okay, but okay. You know, I actually had a logical argument against the Trinity looking at essence and accidents, if you want to look at it. For example, it's very simple. Do you agree that I think with the Aristotelian notion that a thing either had essence or accidents? Do you agree with that? Like these are the two possible properties. Like it had properties that are of its essence and properties that are accidents. Do you agree with that?
Are you gonna? I think I might know where you're going with that.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna say that God has no accident, right? So are
you going to say that the hypostatic properties, since they're not essential, they have to be accidental?
Right, but God is but the divine, like, because what I hear is that all three beings have the same essence, right? That's what I hear. And what I also hear is that God has no accidents because divine simplicity. Then how could they have distinct properties if they have the same essence, like no accidents? Then They're
This
identical.
is
They cannot
because
differentiate themselves in anything. That's what I
the
would say.
hypostatic properties, we would say that the hypostatic properties themselves are identified with the essence. This is because when we speak of hypostatic properties that individuate the persons, we're speaking about relations. So we would say that these relations aren't accidents, but rather they're identified with the essence itself.
Okay, but then they don't have, the all three beings don't have the same essence. If each being has if one being has a property of his essence is to be the sun, the other has the property of being, if that's part of his essence, then you cannot say that all three beings.
We don't say that the essence in itself considered absolutely is like begotten or spirates. Rather, we say that these subsistent relations are things identified with the essence.
Right. Yeah, I know. I'm not sure I get it, but the thing is, what I hear is three persons with the same essence. Do you agree? They say that the three beings have the same essence. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
But is a relation, is being begotten is this property of being begotten part of his essence, or is it an accident? Is it
You
one
cut
of the
out
two?
there. You cut out
Yeah,
there. I
yeah.
didn't really hear you.
Okay. Is being begotten a property that is part of the essence, or that is an accident? Because it's either one of the two. A property is one of the two. It's essence or accident.
I don't know if I would use the language of property of. I would go with the claim that it's identified with the essence rather than being a property of the essence.
Being
So we would say
begotten is
that
not
in
a
a way there's
property.
a we would say that it's a it's not a property of the essence, but rather it's a relation that is identified with it. So we would say it's a third option.
Okay, I don't know, but it seems intuitively obvious to me that it still counts as a property. Like if it's
Yeah, it does. A relation is a property, or can be, I guess. A relation can be a property. We wouldn't deny that. It's just that in this case, it's a subsistent relation that's identified with a substance. So it's different from how a relation would work usually. Because in Aristotle, you can have or I guess in Thomistic metaphysics as a whole, relations are typically accidents, but there are cases where relations can be identified with the substance.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, so what's a
Yeah,
relation?
and
Okay.
a relation would be like a reference to another. So like paternity would be like how the son, or I'm sorry, the father begets the son. So that's a relation of paternity, and we would say that relation is so in our view, right? We would say that the persons just are subsistent relations and that are identified with the essence. So
Right.
for us, the category of person, right? It doesn't exclude the category of relation, meaning that something can be a relation and yet subsistent.
What does subsistent mean?
Basically, when we say something is a hypostasis or a person, we're saying that it's subsistent, and when we say it's a person specifically, we're saying that it's subsistent and of a rational nature. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what subsisting, like to exist?
Not necessarily to exist, because there are things that exist yet aren't hypostasis. But if you want like an example, right? So we would say something like a hand. A hand is not a subsistence, but a rock is. And similarly, a person is a subsistence, but the person's hand, which is a part of the person, wouldn't be a subsistence. So there's a degree of, I guess you could say, ontological fullness or wholeness that is required. If you look at how Thomas Aquinas describes it, he says that if something has its own essay, then it should count as a subsistence, whereas things like hands don't have their own essay and are communicated to another, in which case they don't count as subsistence. Say that the relations here, because they have their own essay via identification with the divine essay, we would say that therefore they count as subsistences.
Okay. But here's the thing. Can we really say that the only thing differentiating one person of the Trinity from another is the relationship? Because it will be like there are three identical beings, but they choose to relate each other. But I mean, it just there has to be some properties that account for this difference in relationship. Is how I see it. Like relationship by themselves, they are not a property, like an essential property. You know.
We would say in this case that the relations aren't properties of the essence specifically, but I mean, you're right that the thing that distinguishes the three persons is just their relations. I wouldn't say it's three beings that choose to be related to each other. Rather, I would say it's one being that has three relations identified with it. I think that's a more proper way to categorize it.
Right. So you have the relationship with other beings.
No, not with other beings, but one person has a relation with other persons.
Okay.
Because we would say that, for example, right, the father is a person who begets the son, and this relation of opposition distinguishes the two. However, we would say considered as God or considered as absolute being, there's no distinction. So one way to put it is that they're distinct in their SA odd, but not in their SAN, which would be.
So the son is identical to the father, except in the relationship, or otherwise the son is identical to the father.
We say that there's no distinction considered absolutely. So one way to put it is with relative identity, where you're saying the father and the son are the same being, but not the same person. So there's an identity relative to a sortal, but not relative to another sortal, which would be how modern day analytic philosophers categorize this.
Right. I mean, so I will have to ask, what's a being? What would be your definition of a being?
That is kind of hard because I don't think being is in a genus per se. So I guess you could say, loosely speaking, a being would be that which exists. Like that's a very loose definition, I know. So
but
they
but it's like a conscious being. Like this cup is not a being, it's an object. I think the word being refers to like conscious being, like the way we normally use it.
Yeah, we would say that what's it called? The divine essence is conscious, and that the three persons have the same consciousness.
Okay, the same consciousness. Because I have other Christians saying that they have three separate consciousness.
Yeah, no, those people would be going against.
They're going against Orthodox teaching.
Oh, really?
Those are social Trinitarians, and they're going against Orthodox Trinitarianism.
Yeah, so the son has two minds after the incarnation, one human and one divine. But when it comes to the three persons, they each share one divine mind and one divine will.
Okay, then I don't see in which and what's a person, because I don't see how could you define
we would
in a way that like makes sense.
Yeah, so we would say that a person would be an individual subsistence that is of a rational nature.
A rational nature, yeah, I heard that.
Yeah,
so
we would say it's a subsistence. The issue with substance is that it can get a bit confusing because people like to equivocate on that, which me and Bust Down saw that recently, but I'm not going to comment on that too much. But with yeah.
Dude, I'll bring up the assumed man right now.
Right. Okay. Yeah, this is not very complicated, and a lot of, but to me, I would say that a substance of a rational nature. So a thing that thinks, is and a conscious being is the same. So when you look at it, it's like you have the same reservation for person and being. I don't a conscious being. I don't know. It's too weird for me. But whatever.
When we so when we say individual subsistence, right? So as I described, right, subsistence refers to being like a hypostasis. So if something subsists, it's a hypostasis. And then if something is rational, then it's a person. So as I gave this example before, we would say that something like if you find a rock on the sea, this rock would be like, it would be its own being, right? We could say it's a supposit, which is just Latin for hypostasis. However, it wouldn't be a person because it's not rational. But then if we take like a hand, because the hand is part of a person and communicated to that person, the hand isn't going to be a hypostasis. And so, for example, Thomas Aquinas talks about how a hand, despite being an individual substance, doesn't count as a hypostasis because it's communicable. And what we're looking for when we speak of personhood is this notion of incommunicability. So for Scotus, this is going to be a relation, whereas for St. Thomas, this is going to be having your own essay. So that's what for us would be used to define a person. And I think the issue that you have is that you're defining a person just as a consciousness, right?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, what's a person? I know what a person is. A person. You are a person. I am a person. Okay, that's the definition I have of person, right? But obviously in the Trinity, there's another definition.
Yeah. So for our definition, we would describe it in terms of subsistence or being a hypostasis, right? So it's just a hypostasis that's rational. But the issue, I guess we could say that we would find with the that definition of person is that for us, we draw a distinction between a person and that person's consciousness. So for example, for us, a person is going to be a composite of a consciousness or a soul and of body. So it's going to
Yeah,
be body plus soul equals a
yeah, yeah.
person. Whereas under your view, the person is just going to be identical to the intellect in a
No, I
way.
get that. I get that
So
we have a body,
yeah.
right? That's the issue.
Uh-huh.
Since
Yeah, so I guess
yeah,
one way you could like argue this is to say that the body is part of a person, right? And since the person and the soul are two absolute identities or two absolute beings, that if the person and the soul were one and the same thing, then you should be able to say that the body is part of the soul. But clearly the body isn't part of the intellect. Although you're a physicalist, so I'm not sure how you would handle that, but I think that even under a physicalist, you can make an argument because I think no matter like I think you're gonna even if you're a substance dualist or a physicalist, you're not gonna be able to say that the person is just the intellect and that's it. Like I don't
yeah,
think you can say the person is just the consciousness because I think the person has to be composed of consciousness and like corporeal parts when you're talking about human persons. And this is relevant because this means that the consciousness is just a or I could say your intellect is the how do I say it? It's the tool by which a person reasons, but it's not identical to the person itself. So
yeah,
we're saying that the three persons of the Trinity have one and the same tool that they use to reason. It's just that they wouldn't be the same considered as relation.
yeah. Sure, okay. That's not really complicated. Yeah. One day, yeah, maybe I will talk to Metaphysics Mike and show him all of this to see what he says. By the way, Apollos, is it okay if I post this in my channel as well, maybe with commentary, the way like people do it in YouTube, like to generate content. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so you're asking if you can take this content and post it to your channel, or what
Yeah,
are you
yeah, yeah.
asking?
Maybe I will split. Yeah, yeah. That's basically the question.
Okay,
Like
yeah,
our
sounds good.
conversation, of course. Or no,
Yeah,
or,
Yeah, I
so
don't mind as long as like you're not like taking us out of context or
no,
like
no, no.
yeah.
yeah, I know you're like you're very you seem to be a very good debater, so you won't I don't think you're gonna do that. But just in like general, I'm fine as long as you're not like clipping us out of context.
No, no,
Yeah,
no.
same
That's
here. Like, let me know if you. I don't know if you have my email, but feel free to shoot an email if you need like access to like a download. If you don't
Uh-huh.
have any like downloading software to download a YouTube video,
yeah,
let
yeah.
me
No, I
know and
can
I can.
record the screen or so. Yeah, yeah. No, that's okay. Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Yeah, that's great.
If you, I think it might be useful if I like send you some stuff on like the Thomistic view of like
Yeah,
metaphysics and the Trinity. Um, hold on, let me see if I
yeah,
can
yeah.
find some
Maybe I
stuff.
will try to get with Metaphysics Mike. This Unitarian guy, and maybe we'll talk to
I know
him about it.
metaphysics,
Yeah,
Mike.
yeah.
I can't lie. I don't know he. So the issue that I have with metaphysics, Mike, is that he debates Trinitarians that don't focus on philosophy, and then he just brings up like philosophical objections, which to someone who which like to someone who like looks into philosophy, they don't sound that strong. Like for example, if you were to put like metaphysics white Mike against like I don't know like Christian Wagner, and like he was to try and like run the arguments that he does, I cannot lie, it would go like horrendously for him. And so like I can't lie, the only reason why he's able to get away with it is because he's going against people who don't like focus on philosophy specifically. It's like it would be interesting to see him debate like Wagner or like if he went on a capturing Christianity debate Dr. Tomaszewski. That would be pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Or I mean he can always like since we're doing this every Saturday, I think if he called on here that would be pretty interesting.
yeah, yeah. That could be cool. Yeah, yeah.
If he did like if you want to do like a philosophical debate.
Yeah, that's great.
hmm
Yeah,
But
for sure.
yeah, so if you want to look into like Thomism, right? I would just say that you should probably go to Thomistic Institute. That's their channel. They give like a good introduction to like Thomistic metaphysics. Then there's a Sanctus Theology. So Sanctus Theology on YouTube. There's Classical Theist, Matoma, Militant Thomist, also known as Scholastic Answers or Christian Wagner, DoorDash Thomist, DeWong, Unionist Initiative. Those would be pretty good channels to learn like I guess you could say our metaphysics from. If you want like a written material, I can pull that up in a second. Hold on. If you want a written material, obviously there's a Thomas Joseph White's book on Thomistic Christology, and I believe he has one on the Trinity too, if I remember correctly. So if you want like an introduction to like to explain our view on the Trinity, like how we think there's one mind and one will, Thomas Joseph White would be a pretty good introduction to that.
Okay, cool. That's great.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, then there's obviously that Mark Spencer paper that I talked about. I can go and find it. Hold on.
Okay.
It is it's called it's this 2017 paper called The Flexibility of Divine Simplicity, Aquinas, Scotus, and Palamos. And he goes into Thomas Aquinas' solution. He goes into John Duns Scotus's views as well, so that might be interesting to you as well.
Yeah, okay.
Then there's there's one article by Christopher Tweed called "Absolute Identity and the Trinity," which he covers the transitivity objection like very directly. There, he gives I think it's a new solution. I don't think anyone has really interacted with it that much, so it might be interesting to see some interaction with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but for me, like, I'm super glad to have someone like Roy, like, steel manning like the philosophical positions for the Trinity, because I'm more of like a textual guy, or like a historical like apologist, if you will, and just like basically goes like, hey, like most Christians don't even understand the Trinity, but it's very clear that these three persons should be ascribed divinity, and in some sense they're one, and so like, yeah, like whatever model of the Trinity it is, like, I mean, like, I think like it's a very important doctrine in terms of like trying to classify who's like in the church or out of the church, but in terms of salvation, like yeah, I this might be a hot take, and I've said it before, but I do think that people who mislabeled modalism for the Trinity are saved. So yeah.
Interesting. What's it called? I'm kind of in an interesting place because Bust Down would probably be more knowledgeable than me on like Thomistic philosophy, and then Apollos would probably know more about me on like textual stuff. But then like I'm somewhere in the middle, so I can do both, but they're probably gonna be better than me at it.
Yeah. I also like more like
says yo.
Yeah.
Oh, Thomas, what's good? Yo, Thomas, you should come up on the panel. That'd be cool.
Yeah. I also prefer the textual stuff, like the kind of stuff that Apologia does, because this philosophical stuff is too complicated for me. This is really hard. It's very hard to get.
That's understandable. Yeah, so a lot of people just don't like the philosophical stuff. I can understand.
Yeah. Okay.
Thomas Apologia would be interesting because he actually disagrees with me on Thomism, because I'd take a very Thomist view on like divine simplicity, but then he wouldn't agree with me on that because he became a neoclassical theist. Very what's it called? It's a very he's probably better than me when it comes to like classical theism stuff. Honestly, he probably would know more than me despite not being one anymore. I wonder like how I converse. Yeah, he's an ex-Thomist. Nah, bro, you gotta just become a Thomist. Like your name is Thomas Apologia, anyways. It's like in your name. True. Make Thomas Apologia Thomist again.
Yeah.
Extra Thomistica Salus. True.
Yeah, but I don't know how much gas you guys got in terms of like the stream. It looks like we've been going on for like an hour and a half, so like
this was a good conversation. I liked it.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Thomas the Doubter.
Yeah, that's funny. Doubting Thomas. All right, but did we want to close out the stream, or did we want to like wait around for like 5 or 10 minutes or something? Wait for like someone else to come in, or not taking?
Is there anybody else like in the back?
I don't see anyone in the back, but